Eve- Good evening, everyone. My name is Bukola David from Sprint Team Agile. I'll be anchoring the presentation slides for the Team Agile team. Starting with Miracle. Miracle, are you ready? Please.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. These are the role leads, and this is the way the presentation will go. And we commence with Miracle, the Agile Delivery Manager. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another sprint demo. This from the Agile Delivery Managers by Miracle and supported by Okewo Emmanuel. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. Okay, this is our schedule. Next slide, please. Okay, introduction. We ensure the team meets deliver the projects on time following the Agile principles, and we ensure the project meets both the owners and customer expectation and satisfaction. Next slide, please. Okay, our contribution, we monitor the project closely, which I use the Gantt chart using Microsoft Projects. We communicate and check what developers done, and if possible, do some corrections, and we work with the team to know of any impediments, and if any, we develop mitigation plan and document them. Next slide, please. Okay, what was done during the sprint? For the long range Agile, Team Agile, 9 PBIs were planned, 6 committed, 1 in QA due to a bug found, which will be explained later, 1 in development due to it was committed late, and 1 not worked on because the attached document was provided very late. Team Binary, we had 7 PBIs planned, 4 completed, 2 in QA due to bugs found, and 1 in development. Next slide, please. Okay, this extras from the Gantt charts. You can see the sign-up functionality. Now, this PBI, okay, we had to commit some PBIs initially. We wanted to commit some PBIs initially, and the developer to remind us that we have to commit this sign-up functionality before we are to commit some PBIs, but they are depending on sign-up functionality. So we had to, and then the sign-up functionality wasn't ready, so we had to wait till the PO approved it, and that took us a lot of time. Seriously, we battled, contacted the PO to approve, and it took a lot of time. So that's why it was stuck here. And you can see for the whole projects, if you can see, we have 77% completed. The login buttons were completed. Next slide, please. Let's continue. Okay, right. How do I shift this one? Okay, these ones, they were completed. Next slide, please. Okay, this visit store, why it wasn't completed, we had the BAs were supposed to provide some documents which was in the hands of the product owner, but unfortunately it was provided on time, so couldn't work on it to this point. The privacy policy, yes, the document there, it was still document issue, but the document provided late. The developer developed it, but the QA found the bug on it, and the bug was found, I think, on a Saturday. So we couldn't really do much with the developer, because developer said he's working on so many projects, so we couldn't really do much on that. Next slide, please. Okay, let's connect copyright completed. Next slide, please. Home functionality completed. Next slide, please. Okay, for the banner, welcome banner, we completed it.
1 minute left.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide. This incentive, we couldn't complete it because the the QAs found the bug and weren't able to reach the developer on that. We reached him, but there was no quick response from him. Next slide, please. Same thing with the health article. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, we had to develop a RAID log, and this was the RAID log we developed. Next slide, please. Okay, the constraints we had: one, lack of quick response from our external resources, which is developer, though they were really busy this period, and delay in obtaining response from the product owner. And that was a major issue because it cost us some PBIs.
5 minutes.
Slide, please.
It's been 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. During this sprint, progress on our communication was top notch. However, we learned that we should prioritize our PBIs for committing them. Next slide, please. Sorry for that. These are self-development Gantt charts. Next slide. Thank you.
My name is Bukola David. I'll be presenting for the Scrum Masters for Team Agile. These are the content of what we'll be running through. And these are the team members of Scrum Master. Our primary objective this sprint 4 is to add functionalities to the features on the Longreach website and to complete the SharePoint project. And looking at our team utilization, we had to balance between the Longreach project and the SharePoint project. And the developers focus on the Longreach project while the Scrum Masters continue the development of the SharePoint project. And towards the end, we had to do a lot of pushing and to meet the deliverables, and we were able to maintain focus and were committed to the sprint goal. We are looking at the metrics next. For the total PBI committed is 15, 9 for the Longreach project, and 6 for the SharePoint project. Delivered were 6 PBIs completed for the Longreach way, which was 66% of the total project committed, total PBIs committed, and 6 of the SharePoint projects PBIs were completed. That is 100%. Looking at our abundant chart, we had 64% completion regarding the burn down chart, and our total scope increase was 10. Our average burn down was 1, and 13 efforts remaining. And for the PBI burn down, 75% completed, 0.9 average burn down, and total scope increase was 5. And our PBI, the number of PBI remaining was 5. And this is an improvement compared to what we had from sprint 3, looking at our average velocity, which is 22. In sprint 3, we had 14. So that means looking at going forward, the team should be able to handle 22 projects, averagely. And our cumulative project, the total work in progress that we have is 62. And this sprint, the velocity for this sprint is also showing the plan, the completed, and the incomplete PBIs. This is a snapshot of our capacity planning, which we had to include our developer this sprint because they joined us, which was not previously so. This is an overview of our Longreach project. This is the home functionality header where we have the sign up, login, and the shop and about contacts. We also have a snapshot of the footer because the Team Agile is handling strictly the header and the footer for the Longreach projects. And these are some of the functionalities that were added for the footer for this sprint. And we have a snapshot of the PBI completed for the SharePoint page. And this I've attached a link for everyone to be able to view the completed work because we completed the SharePoint project this sprint. And this is our other part of the PBIs that we worked on as well, the team tagline, the calendar, the team update. And also we are looking at the planned for our uncompleted committed PBIs. We had 3 uncompleted PBIs that were committed this sprint. The constraint was a critical bug was identified during testing, and by the time it was identified, it was raised, the developer was unable to complete the PBI within this sprint timeline. So what we plan to do is to move it to the next sprint for resolution and retesting, and we are prioritizing all these 3 PBIs for the next sprint completion. Looking at the challenges that we had a bit at the beginning, we had the task overlap and confusion.
1 minute left.
Team Agile and Team Binary, we are working on the URL, and so you are the same URL. So there was a bit of confusion at the beginning, but and the team too were overwhelmed due to the number of tasks we were given. And also, one of the challenges we had, as mentioned earlier by the ADM, is the late provision of the required documents for development of certain PBIs. And the resolution is, for the first one, the issue was escalated to for the PBI was escalated to the product owner, and she was able to clarify which part of the URL the Team Agile had to work on, and which part the Team Binary had to work on. And we escalated the issue of the overwhelming task to the management, which was resolved, and there was a shift in the deadline. And now we are looking at implementing stricter timeline and follow-up for
Time's up.
our then this is a highlight of the sprint retrospective. What went well, what didn't go well, actionable items. These are the lessons learned so far, and we are looking at this sprint, we're able to successfully finalize the SharePoint project. We added significant functionalities to the Longreach website, and next step is to resolve every carrier over PBIs and to add new functionalities to the Longreach website as required by the product owner. Next, we have the business analyst, Rosa Adewale. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Bukola. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosa Adewale. I'm the BA lead for the sprints, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the BA. Next slide, please. Next slide, Bukola, please. All right, for the reports, this is our agenda, and the team members, 9 members of the team contributed to the success of the sprints. These are their names. Bukola, please. Next slide. Next slide. So our meetings and trainings, we meet, no, Bukola. Anyways, our meetings and trainings, we meet every day of the week for knowledge sharing, team supports, and work together on the projects. And on Sundays, we meet with the POs. That's aside a daily stand-up, which every member of the team always attend and participate fully. Next slide. Our team collaboration and achievement for this sprint, we elicit and gather requirements while we also refine and with the PO for possible, where we also refine the requirements for the PO, and approved requirements are also approved by the POs. Then we also update our job board as necessary, moving the PBIs to the right status from in BA to BA done, approved, and committed. We also collaborated with the QAs and developers on the functionality of the requirements, assigned tasks to members of the team. Next slide. Our goals and deliverables for the team is to develop a header and footer, a functional header and footer. So these are our requirements for this particular sprint, header and footer. Next slide. And based on the requirements we gathered, we were able to create a mind map for our deliverables. The tool we use for this particular mind map is XMind. So this particular one was done by every member of the team, contribution from every member of the team. Bukola, please. So we also tried our hands on the use case for Longreach, where we use different, we assign tasks to every member of the team to use different tools, and some use Draw.io, some use their use case, some use XMind as well. And this is a snapshot of the few use case we're able to do for this, we did for this particular project. Next slide. So this is a snapshot of our stories for this sprint. part of our story, our description and acceptance criteria. Next slide. Samples of our wireframes for this sprint, wireframe samples for the PBIs this sprint. Next slide. Our wireframes, we wrote the wireframes on different stories. So I just did a snapshot. We did a snapshot of all the different stories, the different wireframes as it requires. Next slide. Then our backlog items on the Azure board. This is what our Azure board looks like for the BAs. This is a snapshot of our backlog items for this particular sprint, showing the story, the PBI is in committed, in QA, in approved. Next slide. This is also an overview of a Team Agile Azure board. So we can see how our PBIs look like. We have just one in QA, in dev. Next slide. So this is an analysis of the current status of the PBIs. So at the end, when we carried out our UAT, one bug was a bug was raised for Long Reach Way website, and a bug was raised for SharePoint as well. For the Long Reach Way, it was the privacy policy, and we are talking with we've referred to the ADM, and I'm sure it's talking with the developers on that. Next slide, please. So we also tried our hands on our user process map, and this is what we're able to do. We're able to come up with, this is the process map for for the login and sign up. Next slide. Process map for header, and so we just tried our hands around the process map for header, footer, and banner. Even though we at Team Agile is not working on the banner, but we still tried our hands on header, footer, and banner. Next slide. So we also did the end-to-end user process map for end-to-end user process map for Long Reach Way website, and this is what we're able to come up. This is a snapshot of what we did. Next slide. As part of the required documents for this sprint, requirement traceability matrix and racing matrix. So we did our RTM and racing matrix for the team. This is what it looks like. Next slide. We are ahead of sprint 5 goal. We've been able to populate our requirements on the Azure board for the next sprint, and we also refine some of this, if not all, but some of the stories for the next sprint. And as it is today, our requirements are in line with our definition of ready. Next slide. In addition to what we did last sprint, we're able to gather more glossary terms for this particular buzzword. We had different new words like fishbone diagram this week, where this particular sprint, and we're able to add it to. So as it is, we are growing our glossary, our business analysis glossary. Next slide. So lesson learned and impediment. One big impediment is a delay in getting additional documents from the PO. Also difficulty in getting all members of the team together. But the lessons we've learned are increased team output compared to other sprints and enhanced team support. Next slide, Bukola. So these are the tools we use, and we can say categorically that we build our confidence in using all these tools. Next slide. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Olufunke, and I'm the team lead for project managers, and I'm presenting on behalf of the project managers. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, these are the names of the PM team members. We are just 5 of us: Onome, Team Catherine, Omoumi, Oluwabomi, and Olufunke. Next slide, please. And these are the tasks that we completed for sprint 4. We had daily attendance for DSU meetings. We posted blogs on Chartans, sprint planning and refinement, project planning, and more tasks and practice on project planning. Next slide, please. And these are the individual deliverables done by every one of us, all the members, even during this sprint. Next slide, please. And this is the attendance. Next slide, please. And we had project planning by our lecturer, Ayo. And for project planning, I would say that project planning involves outlining a project's goals, scope, task, timeline, resources, and risk to ensure successful execution and completion. And we know that a project is a collection of tasks that must be completed in minimum time or at minimal cost. Next line, please. And this is the project planning. We have project scope, objectives, consult stakeholders, meetings, budgeting, risk register, and please, can you raise it up a little bit, Nicola? Next slide, please. And these are the project planning tools and software. We learned so many things about the project planning. Ayo told us about Trello, Notion, Smartsheet, Monday.com, Jira, Basecamp, Asana. But the one that we use based on this project is the Microsoft project. Next slide, please. Wow, thank you for the opportunity.
Good evening, everyone. Please, Nicola, confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening,
All right.
Samuel.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samuel Timothy, and I am the QA lead for this sprint 4. And I'll be taking you through the agenda for this sprint. Nicola, next slide. Yeah, the agenda for this sprint was very short, and because of the number of PBIs we committed. Briefly, I will take you through the brief introduction of this project. The sprint was centered on the Long Reach project, which aims to develop an e-commerce platform that provides a user-friendly interface. And as testers, we were deeply committed to testing this functionality of this website. Our primary focus was to rigorously test the platform's feature to guarantee a seamless shopping experience for users. This include the user interface testing and the functionality testing. Next slide, please. Talking about testing, here is the test environment, because basically this sprint, we basically did automation, and here is the Visual Studio and C# we used in automation, the Long Reach project itself, the Azure DevOps for the management tool for release control, and of course we captured SharePoint because we had a backlog from the last sprint, which we brought into the sprint. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the test plan and the test strategy. And the purpose of this test plan was just to ensure that the application under test conforms to the functionality and non-functional requirements, and also to ensure that the application under test that it meets the quality specification defined by the client. And our test strategy, of course, we created timelines for all this, like the timeline we're creating for our test plan, for the test execution, test execution itself, and of course for the report. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, and here is the automation. This is what the automation board look like. Here it captures the mentor skid, which was one of our trainer putting us through how to automate the mentor skid, and of course the Long Reach project itself. And here we have the test script, which is the feature page. We have the step definition and the page object duly captured. Next slide, please. Of course, a bug was raised by one of our team member, Omolara, who raised a bug in one of these privacy policy functionality. Next slide, please. This is how the Azure DevOps board looks like after the bug was raised by Omolara. Of course, in your checking in the in-dev, you'll see that the bug is there, and the same it's in QA. Next slide, please. Of course, a bug was raised, but it was too late to be fixed, and we will have gone through the bug life cycle, that is from the new to the assigned to the fixed to the retested, which I believe we're going to do in the next sprint. Next slide, please. This is the requirement traceability metrics. Captured here in the user the requirement traceability metrics is the failed bug, is the bug that was raised, which is the privacy policy functionality. And also you also see that two were captured as non-started yet because it was actually committed. One, as I speak, is still in the in-dev because according to the ADM, said the requirements from the PO was not ready yet, and that is why it wasn't committed and in depth, and we couldn't do anything further on that. Next slide, please. Here's the test summary report. This test summary report captures the longitudinal test execution result and also the SharePoint. You can see the SharePoint out of the 6 PBIs, everything passed. And of course, the longitudinal are
1 minute left.
92% pass and 7% failure. And here is the estimated number of efforts by my team members. Next slide, please. Speaking of the team members, here are the past test lead that actually made this sprint a success. Their support were very encouraging. Next slide, please. And of course, the ever-ready quality assurance engineer will make this sprint a very successful one by putting in their all just to ensure that we achieve the amount of success we could amount for this sprint. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aduli Sukafa, doing the presentation for the data analyst for the sprint. Next slide, please. This is the content of this presentation. Next slide, please. In this sprint, the data analyst will continue to train on our skills, both practical and theory. And also, we had more time to do individual tasks in this sprint. Next slide, please. This is the team. We have 4 data analysts in the team. Next slide. For activities of this sprint, we concluded our Tableau training, continued the Power BI, SQL, the Excel, and then we had individual training on training on how to set up the Azure board and our individual self-development. Next slide, please. This was a task assigned to us for this sprint. Just like the previous sprint, we had to analyze the user stories by the BAs and the test cases by the QAs, then the attendance for the meetings of members of the sprint, and then the task carried out by the data analyst. Next slide. This is the proficiency of each tool that we learned in the sprint. The Excel, we had the training on if functions, test functions, test column, and then we had practical, we had to practice some interview questions and class exercise. In Tableau, we did revision and did some practical on the files, documents that were given. Power BI, we had the DAX, which is the data analysis expression, where we did calculation of measures and then generation of reports. In SQL, you continue to learn how to use queries for string handling and date handling. And then we also used some questions to practicalize that. Next slide, please. This was the interview exercise given by the people in the Excel, and this is the instruction for the exercise and the data. Next slide, please. This was the exercise after completion, showing the pivot chart and the pivot table, the populated table, and then the reports. Next slide, please. This was the SQL during the string and data handling by one of the team members, Paradise. This is the screenshot of when the queries were run. Next slide, please. And this is the continuation of the SQL. Next slide, please. That's the screenshot of the Power BI during the DX. And this is showing the measure tools or the measure where the measure values were calculated. Next slide, please. This is the report view after the measures were calculated. Next slide, please. This was the Excel task given to everyone, and this is what this is the instruction, and this the team also worked on this. Next slide, please. This was the use of the functions of the if function, the arrow showing the red arrow on the function box.
1 minute left.
Showing the formulas that were used for each functions. Next slide, please. This was that of the index function. Next slide, please. This is for if error and VLOOKUP. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This was the completed task of the task, showing the consolidated table and the pivot chart, the pivot table. Next slide, please. This is the PBI and test cases analysis by each BAs and how they would carried out their user stories, how the user stories were written and how the test cases were done. Next slide, please. This is the attendance by
Time's up.
the spring. Next slide, please. This is the self-development, the Tableau dashboard that was created by Sarah. Next slide, please. And this is dashboard by me. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. One of the challenges we encountered in this sprint was the team members were overwhelmed, but it was later resolved at the end of the sprint. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
And that's it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isioma Babatunde, the team lead for Scrum Master for this Sprint 4. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And here is our table of agenda. This is the agenda as seen. Next slide, please. And here is our project mandate. The project mandate, project goal, sprint goal, and the duration. The project goal, general goal for Longreach e-commerce website to create a comprehensive e-commerce platform for Longreach UK to enable easy online sales and distribution of health and beauty products while improving customer engagement and support. Then our sprint goal, the goal for this sprint is to create PBIs under this function, making them clickable. Authentication, logo, top menu, which includes about us, contact us, products, and shopping cart. And the duration was there for just 2 weeks. Next slide, please. And these are everyone involved, the role leads, the Scrum Masters. Next slide, please. And our Scrum ceremonies as highlighted. Next slide, please. And our sprint achievements for sprint 4, the Chatham group tags, SharePoint page, wiki page, they were all updated, and we had the Longreach site developed. We also had the prep major site assessed. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is for the product backlog items, PBIs committed. We had 22 planned, we had 7 committed. Then for our career development swim lead, there was professional summary, CV creation, CV review, there were trainings, all updated. And for the capacity planning, teams were committed in ensuring the sprint goals were met, everyone involved as highlighted. Next slide, please. And this is our matrix charts. Talked about our sprint, the sprint 4 burn down chart, the velocity. For this very one, this is our burn chart used to measure our work in progress, and it shows the amount of work done and remaining. The blue line showing our product backlog items, the green showing the completed work we started. We started with some PBIs, the BA added more. We completed some and had one bug, which we haven't been able to fix the bug. Most of the PBIs committed during this sprint planning were the ones our BAs were treating before the development environments were merged. Most of the PBIs committed are the ones fixed by the team Agile. The ones we committed for ourselves, we were able to develop everything. That's what is showing on the board down right now. Then the velocity chart also, we committed some PBIs along the line. More were added. We committed the ones meant for us. That's why the ones committed are more than the ones remaining. We completed every one of them. The rest was developed by Team Agile, but because our BAs had already written it before they merged the environment, that's why it appears on the board like this. Then we also used cumulative charts also to track our work in progress. We also use it to track how many tasks are in each stage of the workflow. Then we also use our cumulative flow to get more information, such as the backlog tasks, work in progress, and work completed, as you can see within the diagram. Next slide, please. Then the Long Reach Way project deliverables. The deliverables for Long Reach project for Sprint 4 includes the banner page, the quick link, the contact page, the shopping cart page. Next slide.
1 minute left.
The screenshots of the website developed. Next slide, please. Then the impediments and mitigations, the impediments we face, prep measures and charters will not be assessed by all. More focus on individual tasks than the team tasks. We had uncompleted PBIs from Sprint 3, which were added to Sprint 4, which slowed down our whole process. But we're also able to solve a lot of it. Discussion among the team members later presented before stakeholders to give us more time to complete individual tasks at a future date. Issues escalated to the ADMs. Then the last one, can you please go to the next slide, please? Then the last slide, this very slide talks about the retrospective. We are able to identify what went well, what didn't go well, what needs improvement, then our action plans as highlighted. Next slide, please.
Time's up.
Yeah, lessons learned, quick explanations to the ADM, collaboration and effective communication, encourage constructive feedback, ensuring all school ceremonies are effectively done and productive. Next slide, please. That's all. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. The Agile Delivery Manager is also Miracle, and he has also presented his slides on Team Agile. He has the same content, so I'm going to take it up from here. So you can move to the PM. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'm the project manager lead for this sprint. And here is the list of the project managers who contributed to the success of this sprint. At the next slide, here's the agenda for this meeting. I'm going to be speaking about the project manager role down to the tools that we used during this sprint. So next slide, the project manager's role, understanding our role, that was key thing we did during the sprint. That is our responsibilities, particularly for this sprint, which include to provide high-level updates and manage stakeholders' expectations through communication. And the second one is to set, that's the third one, to set KPIs and oversee metrics, collection and focusing on business outcomes. That's in terms of the tracking we do, the attendance tracker and the activity tracker. The third one is we are also responsible for handling issues unresolved by Scrum Masters and ADMs. And lastly, our task is to document and communicate and approve project scope changes. So the next slide is the work done. This document shows the work done by the project managers for this sprint. And the key activities for this sprint, I'll go into details about these activities in the next slides. However, the items planned for this sprint, this includes a personal presentation, end of program report, attendance tracker, self-development training guides for the project, and the change request process. The BA created the document and will be creating the process using Visio. Also, we will attend other team meetings to ensure that we have information about the project and share our lessons learned. The risk and issues encountered within the PM team this sprint were absence of team members. We shared, however, even though we had some absentees amongst us, but we shared duties among ourselves in order to ensure that our work were done. Also, lack of mentorship. What we did was we reached out to our mentors. We spoke with 3 of them, and we had one of them attend one of our meetings. Another thing was time constraint on assignments. We had numerous assignments that deviated us from the project. However, we liaised with to extend the submission deadline. Another constraint was lack of tools. Some tools were unavailable, so we purchased some of them and helped team members with downloading and installation problems. We supported ourselves. So the key decisions and support required for next sprint is training guides. Will be providing training guides for this project. However, this is subject to approval, and also the change request process will be creating that is also subject to approval by the stakeholders. Next thing is attendance tracker. This is showing the key meetings attended during the sprint. Next is attendance analysis. We had a good attendance despite the holidays and other key life activities that are happening. For example, we have Team Binary Baby, and you would agree with me that it's a good reason to be absent. And once again, we want to say congratulations to Jack and family. Next is glossary. We created a document, a glossary document. Glossary document is a reference to, it helps to define key terms, acronyms, and all of the jargons that we use during this project to ensure that our stakeholders understand what we are, when we speak what we're speaking about. The next is our activity tracker.
1 minute left.
Yeah, an activity tracker to ensure training. Sorry, can you go there? I can't see that. Okay, document index. We created document explaining each document. This is used so far in the sprint. This is to provide an overview of the purpose, the content, and ownership of all the key documents that are being used in this project, and is also to provide clarity to stakeholders. This includes the RAID logs, the RACI, all of the main documents used. And the next one is our project status report. This is the report showing that we are on track and the health of the status of this project. It shows, but this one shows that we are on track. We committed 14 PBIs, some completed, some in progress, and some in develop. So, and also we have planned accomplishment for the next sprint. Next slide. Next slide. So for our weekly training, we continued creating project plan using MS Project. We used MS Project Plan is used to outline the project objectives, scope, timeline, resources, and deliverables. So we learned how to add resources, calendars, holidays to the project plan. And this has also been replicated by the ADM for the Long Reach project for this sprint. And I can confidently say that all PMs can create this for any project going forward. Lessons learned during this sprint, PM role definition, we met with our mentors to analyze and define our roles better. Also, we learned how to add calendars and resources to the project plan. Also, we gained valuable tips on CV review, job searching tips, and PM career pathways from our facilitator, which is Ayo. Also, Excel training, we learned how to use XLOOKUP, text to column, and worked on practical examples. The 2 years that MS Project, PowerPoint, next slide, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, ClickUp, and Azure, Microsoft Azure. Okay, next slide. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ijeoma Eko. I'll be presenting for Binary BA. Next slide, please. This shows our key agenda for Sprint 4. Next slide, please. This shows our key meetings that we had throughout the Sprint 4. On the 22nd of June, we had the requirement elicitation. 13th of July, we had the PBI refinement with our PO. And then every Wednesdays, we have meetings with our mentors. On the 16th of July, we had a sprint 4 planning. Next slide, please. So our sprint 4 goal was to automate the menu bar. The features were 3, authentication, logo, and top menu. Next slide, please. This shows the next thing to do was to identify our stakeholders, which at the top right corner of the quadrant, we can see our key stakeholders that had to be the most interest and that had the most interest and power. We needed to keep an eye on them and keep them informed. At the bottom left shows our less interested and powerful stakeholders, which are the DA and the QA. Next slide, please. This is our racing metrics. Next slide, please. This shows our requirements after elicitation. We had 11 PBIs after this under the 3 features. Next slide, please. This shows our PBIs, a cross-section of the user stories that we wrote and the acceptance criteria. Unfortunately, we couldn't change the logo as Uzo suggested in our last sprint because these were already written, but we're not committed based on the fact that we were just how do I put it now? We were only able to commit 5 last sprint. Next slide. This is an overview. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is an overview of sprint 4 PBIs on the Azure board. As we can see, the progress, and then this is Azure board progress of the backlog items. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this graph here shows the number of PBIs each of the BAs wrote. Unfortunately, Deborah was indisposed and Abisola had to write 2 because of that. We were able to commit 22 PBIs during the sprint planning. Under the direction of the PO, we were only able to commit, we were only able to do 7 PBIs, which were under the banner because we had to share the URL with Team Agile. The status of the banner PBIs, 1 PBI in dev, 3 in QA, and 3 done. Next slide, please. So we thought it was necessary to show the wireframe against the websites that was created. So this shows long-reach websites against our wireframes. Next slide, please. So this wireframe replicates the previous slide, which automatically shows that the UAT was done and meets our definition of done. Next slide, please. Keep going, please. This also shows the meets the requirements and shows the UAT was done, which means that everything was in order and everything that we requested for were all developed. Next slide, please. So this shows the documents. Next slide, please. Next slide.
1 minute left.
Next slide, please. So we had long-reach documents prepared. We had stakeholder metrics, the racing metrics, the process map, persona. Please, next slide, please. So this shows the other process map for long-reach, starting from the point the customer decides to add items to their cart, till payment success and order is confirmed. Next slide, please. So this shows the customer journey map. We have a customer persona a day, and we can see that the customer is excited to visit the site, but slightly apprehensive to create an account because of the privacy concerns, but anxious because of payment security and uncertainty. Next slide, please. This shows them the use case specification, showing the actor, the description, and preconditions and post conditions that had to be met. Next slide, please. This is the change request document that was necessary. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Time's up.
This is the a template that we created with the issue of the URL. We had to create this to show the importance of the change request documents. This shows the functional requirements that was necessary for this long reach web projects. Lessons learned were better adapted to changes. Were better adapted to changes from our stakeholders. We improved our discussions and collaborations with non-BA role members. We asked relevant questions. We improved on active listening and communication, identified impediments early, and mitigated our risk. This shows, next slide, this shows our tools that we use. We use the Balsamiq for the wireframes, Visio for our process map, Lucidchart for our customer journey, Miro for our mind map, to mention a few. So this shows our mind map for Sprint 5, and we're able to, after elicitation, we're able to create 4 features as seen on the mind map. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Unida Malodunsi. I'm presenting for the data analyst. And here is our agenda as highlighted. Next slide, please. The group members as highlighted. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of the proficiency we've gained using the various tools in Sprint 4. Next slide, please. And in Excel, we carried out some tasks while learning the following concepts: the text to column, data validation, and conditional formatting. Next slide, please. So in text to column, we learned how to split data. As you can see, as highlighted, the data on the left-hand side has been split using text to column, and we have the first name, last name, employee ID, and the full-time or the part-time. Next slide, please. Also, using text to column, we're able to convert date from a particular format to another format. You've skipped. Yeah, and in this case, we convert the American date to the European date. Next slide, please. Also, using text to column, we can convert numbers to text as highlighted. Next slide, please. And in data validation and data conditioning, the data validation is good for ensuring that nothing is done outside what you've created. And then the conditional formatting is good for highlighting data and cells, such as cells with duplicates. Next slide, please. And here is a class exercise which we carried out. And in this particular exercise, we're able to test our knowledge of index and match, VLOOKUP, if, XLOOKUP. And as highlighted, this is the result we're able to generate as highlighted. Next slide, please. Here is a continuation of the class exercise, generating a pivot table and also a pivot chart showing the anomalies as highlighted from the previous slide. Next slide, please. In SQL, we acquired more skills and we gained more proficiency in string handling and data handling. Next slide, please. So in string handling, we covered reverse, concatenate as highlighted on the slide. Next slide, please. We also carried out some tasks using the cast query, and as highlighted on the slide, this is the query as it was being run, and then this is the result, the output of the query. Next slide, please. Also, we gained more proficiency in data handling, and data handling basically helps to format data and carry out date-related calculations. So under the data handling, we carried out some queries with get dates, date add as highlighted on the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. And date diff, which returns the difference between two date values. Date part, which returns a specified part of the date. Next slide, please. And date name, which returns a specified part of the date as a string value using the query as highlighted on the slide. Next slide, please. Here are some practice questions we carried out using the data add. And as you can see on the slide, running these queries, these are the outputs you will generate. Next slide, please. Also, these are also some practice questions using the count, using where, and using group by as highlighted on the slide. Next slide, please. In Power BI, we continued carrying out some analysis using the Adventure Work Sales data set, and then we get more proficiency in creating model calculations using data analysis expression, calculated measures and calculated columns, and also calculate functions. Next slide, please.
1 minute left.
In the concept of data analysis expression, we learned about calculated measures and calculated columns. Next slide, please. Here is highlighting the difference between columns and measures. Next slide, please. And also highlighting the calculate function, which is a type of DAX function that evaluates an expression in a modified filter context. Next slide, please. So we were able to carry out different DAX functions to generate columns, tables, and measures. Next slide, please. And also this is a continuation of the measures we were able to generate. I mean, the columns we were able to generate. Next slide, please. Also the measures. Next slide, please. So using all the DAX function, this is what we're able to generate in terms of the date, the year, the quarter, the month, and the month scale. Next slide, please. Also with the measures, we're able to generate the average price, the median price,
Time's up.
median price, minimum price, maximum price, order number, another line. Next slide, please. In Tableau, we continue to deepen our knowledge and carried out some personal tasks. Next slide, please. Here is a dashboard of the analysis carried out to decide on the best company to invest in using profit parameter and expense parameter. Next slide, please. Also, this is a dashboard of analysis carried out to show the best performing company to invest in using expense and profit parameter. And in this case, is the Randler company. Next slide, please. Here also is a dashboard showing analysis of profit trajectory of 2 companies using pivoted columns. Next slide, please. And also we did visualization of activities of Team Binary. We did the attendance tracker and the PBIs worked on. Next slide, please. Here is a visualization of the attendance tracker. Next slide, please. Another visualization of the attendance tracker. Next slide, please. Visualization of attendance tracker, and also the analysis of the PBI work done by Team Binary as of 26th July. It may have changed now, but as of 26th July, when we downloaded the data.
Time up, please. Time up, please. You need to respect the timekeeper, so move fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamna Mebi Williams. I'm the QA lead for Team Binary Sprint 4. Here's the names of all the team members. We have myself as the QA lead. We have Edwin, Nathan, Adibayo KG, Davies. We have Rita and Rexford, our test manager and our mentor, as well as Harold. Attached here is a screenshot of the PBIs that were assigned to all the team members evenly. For this sprint, we had 7 PBIs committed, and sprint 3, we didn't do so much, so we had to add that to the sprint 4, which made it 14. We had 13 that were in depth done, so we evenly distributed it amongst ourselves. 4 of which failed, and bugs were raised. They were related to the developers, and they were not showstoppers, thankfully. Next slide, please. Attached here is the bug that was raised. This is the acceptance criteria. By your left and by your right is the URL, Long Reach Way website. And it was related to the developer, like I said earlier. Next slide, please. In the course of the sprint, we had learned some things. We had learned the importance of Selenium WebDrivers and importance to the automation of web browsers. We had learned about the key features, one of which includes allowing testers and developers to interact with web elements, which are the input field, the buttons, the text field. Next slide, please. Here's a representation of some of the web elements. We have the drop down, the button, and the input field. Next slide, please. Also, another key feature is that it allows us to switch from tabs to tabs, from windows and in between browsers. So here's just like the URL of the Long Reach websites, just trying to showcase that. Next slide, please. So we also have locators, where I thought that locators are used to identify web elements. And we have 8 types of locators. We have the CSS locator, which is the cascading style sheet locator, which has to do with styles, styling fonts, text size, and all of that. We also have the name locator. We have the class name locator. We have the partial link text locator. We have the link text locator, the tag name locator, the ID locator, all of which we're told about their unique attributes and what they are used for. We also have the expert locator, which we used commonly in this automation for this sprint. Why? Because it's really flexible and it's easy to locate elements. Next slide, please. Here is the automation test on the Long Reachway website for the contact page rather. This is our features file, which are our base test that was created. We named our hooks folder base test. This is the step definition, and this is the page objects. Next slide, please. This is the URL. Here we had to inspect to get our locator, so we could declare it with the appropriate byte clause in the locator, which is the expert we used for those particular projects. And we're able to do it and run our project, and it was successful. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.